Best advice
is invest in your analytical and consulting skills, because if you know what the problem is, then the solution becomes more visible, more evident. The amount of times we go, we need a course. Oh, well, brilliant. You've decided the solution before you know the problem. Even worse, Tom, right, is that we build what looks like a comprehensive learning suite with face-to-face programs and content. And then what we do is we try to draw a line between what we've already decided the solution is and the business strategy. And go, I think we've got that covered. And it's totally the wrong way round.
Welcome to the Rogue L&D Hot Shots podcast, a short podcast allowing you to meet some of the brilliant folk driving people performance and development forward in an informal and human way. My name's Tom Bailey, award-winning L&D leader and passionate maverick for all things development. Join me as I ask just 10 questions of some of the industry's most innovative and interesting people. Tell us about yourself.
So I'm David James. I'm Chief Learning Officer at 360 Learning. I have 25 years in the field of learning and development, including 8 years at Disney, where I left as Director of Learning, Talent and OD. I am also the host of the Learning and Development podcast and a Chelsea fan for my sins.
What are you passionate about?
Bold learning and development leaders who don't accept the status quo, but seek to stand for impact. That sounds easy, but it's really, really hard. Learning and development that is expected and requested is nothing like standing for impact. And you actually need to feel as if you're being a heretic in your organization in order to stand for that. But for whether it's for professional integrity or doing what you say, you need to be seen as a radical almost, as the no person. But to do that with savvy, to do that in a way that enhances your career rather than damages it, is real skill. And that really lights me up. And I hope that that's the type of guest that we hear more often than not on the Learning and Development podcast.
What's the best L&D you've seen?
The L&D campaign that I found the most inspiring was at Sky, and I spoke to Tracy, who was the Director of People Experience, on the podcast. It's an early episode. Their whole thing was truly impacting the work, and they started with first-line managers, recognizing that every now and again, we go through this circular thing, which is we haven't done anything for a while. We give them something new and novel. We hope it works. We look back and we wonder whether it did. So we go again on the same cycle. And they decided to break that cycle by truly engaging in analysis with a product mindset and with agile methodology, really get to the bottom of what first-line managers needed. And they did away with what we'd see as normal status quo L&D products, which was training programs and e-learning. And they really went with resources at the moment of need, conversations rather than training courses. So they scooped people up and they took them on this journey towards more informed, confident and competent line management. And what I loved about that is that the humility of that team, and they actually wrote a blog series on Medium called Agile in Learning that catalogues their entire journey from the genesis of the idea, skilling themselves, and then the actual impact made. And I just think that for an experienced and well and reputable leader like Tracy to admit perhaps that she doesn't know it all and go again with a different skill set, but one that was laser focused on impact. For me, I found that totally inspiring. And it changed the way that they did L&D at Sky with the team. They completely re-skilled the team and they spoke with both passion and purpose about what they did. And for me, that's the most inspiring campaign that I've ever seen in L&D.
Favorite hand gesture?
I do quite like the presidential point I do hope that this is going to be a video as well as audio. But for the purposes of just audio, it's the thumb as a point rather than a finger as a point. And I think that I learned that when it related to Bill Clinton, and of course then Tony Blair took that on, and now I think it's in the lexicon of hand gestures. But it's wonderful to get halfway through your life and then see something brand new and go, oh wow, every day is a school day in that.
One thing you didn't learn.
And I know it's a cliche, but I think that it's the stages of parenting. I think it does relate to corporate L&D because there isn't a lesson that you can learn. There's nothing you could learn up front or be interested in enough for it to linger in your brain and then influence what you do. I think that like a lot of things, that the challenges that we face as parents and in work change and morph as we get more mature in the role. So stages of parenting really surprised me. But I suppose as well, like from a corporate perspective, I started out in learning and development, and I've moved into via my own company Loop and then 360 into marketing. And I think that learning a completely different discipline, albeit not learning it, immersing yourself in it, does expose you to new and enriching influences. And I'd like to think as well that there's an approach to that, which is if you do bring with you a humility and certainly I don't know everything about this, I think it keeps you young. I mean, we talk about, wanting, a growth mindset or elasticity in terms of our thinking rather than a rigidity. And so I think that admitting that you don't know a lot is heartwarming. I think that you see this stuff on Instagram and things. There are two types of people in the world. There are the astrophysicists who say that they know nothing. And they, when asked the most difficult questions about the universe, they'll say, I know very little. As humanity, we know very little, but what we do know. And then you've got the other side, which is people who don't know a lot, who do believe they know a lot about stuff. And I think that you're better off thinking that you are of the astrophysicist's mind that I know next to nothing, and then surprising both yourself and others perhaps by what you do know.
Proudest moment.
I was listening to Michelle Ocker's brilliant podcast, Learning Uncut, and she was interviewing Sebastian Tyndall. At that point, I'd never spoken to Sebastian Tyndall, who was talking about his digital resources first approach to L&D, which was inspired by a conversation between myself and Bob Mosier on my podcast. But as I was listening, so that caught me by surprise. But before that moment, I was really inspired by what Sebastian Tyndall was doing. And I thought, oh, this is incredible. Then he mentioned that conversation, which was his pivot point. And I will tell you right now, I was out walking with my dog, and I've never felt prouder that something I did had that impact on someone else, and I was inspired by that someone else, and I think that was incredibly proud. That one.
Worst experience in L&D.
When I was at Lehman Brothers, asked to deliver some training on performance management. It was a young, up and coming, raw part of the organization. So I was delivering this to established middle managers. This stuff that had gone down pretty well in my previous company, and I could see it was sinking like a stone. And the room started to splinter off with people talking amongst themselves, and I could feel myself just dying on my feet. And somebody then said, like, as I almost turned around to change a slide or look at my notes, he just looked and went, and when do we tell them they're shit? And I just went, I just wanted to just be eaten up by the floor. And you just go, this is awful.
Best celebrity moment.
So when I was at Disney, I was fortunate to fly business class when I went on trips, and I flew to Shanghai for a trip, I flew to Buenos Aires, but it was on a flight from Burbank back to London, and I got into the cabin. It's all herringbone in business class, and I saw opposite me that there were these three guys with, I mean, much older guys, looked like they were in the 60s, with dyed black hair, and I was thinking, they're going to be famous rockers. And I had to look, I was staring thinking, but which band? I was thinking, Aerosmith. No, it's not Aerosmith. I had a look, and then all of a sudden, the overhead compartment right next to my herringbone went up, and looking straight at me was Paul Stanley from Kiss, the lead singer from Kiss. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then he sat or laid in the herringbone right next to me. So I shared a flight back with Paul Stanley from Kiss. Now that is going to be a delightful anecdote for a certain type of viewer or listener, but it's going to be completely oblivious to what that means to perhaps anybody under 40.
Something you believed, but nobody else did.
I've always found that when I started banging a drum and I've seen something and thought, I've seen something here that no one else is talking about, invariably someone else not has just been talking about it for a while, but they've probably been talked about for a long time. I mean, Guy Wallace is the greatest example of that. That Guy Wallace has been pushing performance-oriented L&D since, at least 1982. He's been in the profession since 1979. But his mentors were writing about this in the 1960s and 70s. So I do think that so much of what that I certainly believe in, which is performance-oriented, impactful L&D, it's all been done before. But I think the ways in which we can get there might be seen as Emperor's New Clothes. Skills-based learning is a way of getting there. AI-powered tools can help us to understand problems and get solutions out and iterate those problems greatly on our behalf. Automating compliance, like using whether it be AI algorithms, my goodness, like all of this stuff, rather than Emperor's New Clothes, I say that it's almost the other way around. Like, I'm such a strong advocate for it, and I would say to anyone, if you're not doing this, you're eating up time in admin that you really shouldn't, or working on problems that you're going to get to the end. And I've done plenty of this. You spend an enormous amount of money, time, effort, other people's attention on stuff that when it's done, you will then go, well, did it make any difference? And I think that we don't ever have to be there. There's analysis that's robust, that we can lean on, and there are approaches. But I suppose there's a long way of saying I don't think there's anything, but I think that there are things going on right now that are well worth us just lifting the lid on and exploring, because we might find ourselves in a better position if we do.
Best advice.
So the number one thing is invest in your analytical and consulting skills, because if you know what the problem is, then the solution becomes more visible, more evident. But the thing is, we've used analysis almost to validate the types of approaches we want to use in design and delivery. The amount of times we go, we need a course. Oh, well, brilliant. You've decided the solution before you know the problem. And then what we do is we look for the learning need, or do you know what, even worse, Tom, right, is that we build what looks like a comprehensive learning suite with face-to-face programs and content. And then what we do is we try to draw a line between what we've already decided the solution is and the business strategy. I go, I think we've got that covered, and it's totally the wrong way round. So if we work of analytical skills, so we understand, and some of my favorites are car binders, 6 boxes, because that one more than any other helps us to consult beyond learning, but also say to our stakeholders, a lot of this isn't going to be learning, but let's get it all out on the table, and we can see what the factors are that are impacting the way the work's being done. So I love that. I love rapid task analysis. I love action mapping. I love Nick Shabtajo's 5DI for its pure accessibility, and also keeping you on the right path from the first D right to the last D in the I. It's perfectly succinct and will keep you well on track. When you build up the confidence to bring those approaches into a consulting meeting with your stakeholder, it will transform everything about your L&D. Not just that you'll deliver more stuff that lands and works, but your credibility in those meetings. And because you'll be able to use that credibility to influence stakeholders and build a learning and development offering that is designed for impact at the outset, rather than something that you will be left looking at in 2 to 3 years thinking, did any of that make any difference? So that, more than any other, I would say to folks, because our tools will change. Our technologies will change, and the expectations on us will change down the line with advancing technology, with AI, and the ways in which people are expected to work. But the one thing that won't is that those initial conversations with stakeholders to truly unpack what the problems are, and our ability to gain credibility over time. That's not going to change. So that's what I'd say that we should all invest in.
Thank you to our guest and to you for listening. If you want to boost the impact of your organization's people development practices, I'd love to connect. You can find me at thomasbailey.co. Alternatively, you can look me up on LinkedIn.